The arid breeze of Dalma Island, nestled within the Grand Emirate of Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, carried an air of secrecy. Surrounded by the azure waters of the Persian Gulf, this small island community thrived on tradition and family honor. It was here, amidst the narrow, dusty streets and modest homes, that a sinister tale unfolded, one that would leave the world reeling. Fatima al-Noor was a devoted wife, or so everyone thought. At 29 years old, she had been married to Omar al-Noor, a man 10 years her senior, for nearly a decade. Their marriage, arranged by their families, was outwardly harmonious. Omar worked tirelessly as a pearl diver, often spending weeks away at sea, while Fatima remained at home, managing their household and caring for their 2 young children, Layla and Omar. But behind the veil of domestic tranquility lay a shadowy truth, a truth that Fatima guarded with her life. It all began innocently enough. Omar's father, Sheikh Ibrahim, a widower in his late 50s, had moved in with the family after a fall left him unable to live alone. Despite his frailty, Sheikh Ibrahim carried himself with a regal authority, his deep voice and piercing gaze commanding respect from all who met him. For Fatima, however, his presence ignited feelings she could not explain nor resist. The affair began subtly. A lingering glance here, a whispered conversation there. Fatima found herself drawn to Ibrahim's wisdom and charm, qualities that stood in stark contrast to Omar's gruff and often inattentive demeanor. The late-night meetings in the dimly lit kitchen soon escalated to secret rendezvous in the deserted sand dunes just outside the village. Their passion burned fiercely, but with it came the gnawing fear of discovery. Dalma Island was a close-knit community where secrets were difficult to keep. Yet Fatima and Ibrahim were cunning. They communicated through coded notes hidden in the folds of Fatima's prayer shawl, and their clandestine encounters were carefully timed during Omar's long absences. But even the most meticulous plans are not immune to human error. One fateful evening in early October 1997, Omar returned home unexpectedly from a diving trip, citing rough seas as the reason for his early arrival. As he entered the house, he noticed a pair of men's sandals by the door, not his own. His pulse quickened. Silently, he crept through the house, his heart pounding like a drumbeat. He stopped short outside the bedroom door, where muffled voices and stifled laughter betrayed an unimaginable betrayal. Throwing the door open, Omar found Fatima and Sheikh Ibrahim locked in a compromising embrace. The room froze in a tableau of horror. Time seemed to stretch endlessly in the pregnant silence before erupting into chaos. Omar's guttural roar of rage shook the walls as he lunged at his father, fists flying. Fatima screamed, pleading for mercy, but there would be none that night. The scuffle was brutal. Omar, blinded by fury, barely noticed the ornate dagger his father brandished. The blade found its mark, slashing across Omar's arm and chest. Blood sprayed across the room as Fatima watched in stunned terror. She knew she had to act. In a moment of panic, she grabbed a heavy brass lamp from the bedside table and brought it down on Omar's head with a sickening thud. Omar crumpled to the floor, his body twitching before going still. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Fatima's ragged sobs and Sheikh Ibrahim's labored breathing. "What have we done?" Fatima whispered, her voice trembling. Sheikh Ibrahim's eyes were wild. "We have no choice. We must get rid of him." Under the cover of darkness, they wrapped Omar's lifeless body in a sheet and carried it to the dunes. Digging through the coarse sand with their bare hands, they buried him in a shallow grave. By the time the first light of dawn kissed the horizon, all traces of the crime had been erased. But secrets have a way of surfacing. For weeks, Fatima and Sheikh Ibrahim carried on as if nothing had happened. To the neighbors, Omar's disappearance was explained away as an extended diving expedition. Fatima's tearful performance of a worried wife convinced even the most skeptical villagers. But the children, Layla and Omar, began to notice their mother's strange behavior, the furtive glances, the sleepless nights. Layla, particularly, became restless. Observing her mother's distracted state, she began following Fatima silently, watching her movements late into the night. She noticed Fatima pacing, muttering under her breath, and clutching a torn piece of fabric from Omar's old shirt. Her suspicions grew stronger as she overheard cryptic exchanges between her mother and grandfather. Words like body, grave, and police sent chills down her spine. Unable to bear the weight of her discoveries, Layla confided in her teacher, who immediately contacted the authorities. When the police arrived at the Al-Noor household, Fatima's composure cracked. She stammered through their questions, her eyes darting nervously to Sheikh Ibrahim, who remained eerily calm. Investigators searched the home thoroughly, but it was the children's accounts that directed their attention to the dunes. Layla's innocent yet chilling account of whispered conversations between her mother and grandfather proved pivotal. As authorities unearthed Omar's grave, shockwaves rippled through the island. Fatima and Sheikh Ibrahim were arrested. The community's trust was shattered as the grim reality of their crime became known. But the story didn't end there. In court, more damning truths came to light. The trial was a spectacle, drawing reporters and curious onlookers from all over Abu Dhabi. The prosecution argued that Fatima and Sheikh Ibrahim had conspired to kill Omar to carry on their forbidden affair without fear of retribution. But Fatima's defense team presented a shocking twist. Under intense cross-examination, Fatima broke down in tears, revealing a pattern of emotional manipulation and abuse by Sheikh Ibrahim. "He preyed on my loneliness," she sobbed, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "He made me believe we were in love, but it was all a lie." The courtroom fell silent as Fatima recounted how Sheikh Ibrahim had coerced her into the affair, exploiting her vulnerability and isolation. She described years of subtle threats and psychological manipulation. Fatima claimed that on the night of the murder, it was Sheikh Ibrahim who had delivered the fatal blow, using her as a scapegoat to cover his tracks. Sheikh Ibrahim's calm facade began to crumble under the weight of Fatima's testimony. Under relentless questioning, he admitted to orchestrating the affair but maintained that Omar's death was an accident. However, evidence painted a more sinister picture. Forensic analysis revealed defensive wounds on Omar's body, suggesting a violent struggle. As the trial progressed, more layers of Sheikh Ibrahim's manipulative behavior came to light. Witnesses testified to his authoritarian demeanor and history of intimidating those around him. The defense built a narrative of a man who thrived on control, using fear and coercion to bend others to his will. Meanwhile, the prosecution remained steadfast, portraying Fatima as a willing accomplice who had willingly betrayed her husband for passion and power. The jury wrestled with the complex moral and legal questions surrounding the case. But the trial took another dark turn when an anonymous letter arrived at the courthouse. The letter, written in shaky handwriting, claimed that Sheikh Ibrahim had committed other crimes in the past, including the disappearance of a young maid who worked in his household decades earlier. The letter also detailed the exact location of a hidden diary kept by the maid, which could reveal damning evidence. The diary, unearthed in an old storage chest, painted Sheikh Ibrahim as a predator who exploited the vulnerable. The maid had detailed years of abuse, threats, and coercion at his hands. This new evidence further solidified the prosecution's case and left the defense scrambling. In the end, the verdict was a mix of relief and heartbreak for the community. Fatima was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Sheikh Ibrahim received the death penalty. The sentence was a somber reminder of the devastating consequences of betrayal and unchecked desire. As Fatima was led away in handcuffs, she glanced back at her children one last time. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I'm sorry." The weight of her choices hung heavy in the air, a tragic reminder of how far one can fall when consumed by desperation. But even as the dust settled on the trial, Dharma Island remained haunted by the tragedy. Some claimed to hear Omar's ghost wailing in the dunes at night, a spectral reminder of the lives torn apart by deceit and greed. Others whispered of shadows moving along the shoreline, a ghostly echo of the man who had once walked those sands. Years later, an archaeologist exploring the dunes stumbled upon an unmarked grave near Omar's burial site. The skeletal remains, identified through DNA testing, were those of the young maid mentioned in the anonymous letter. As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered connections to Sheikh Ibrahim, suggesting that Omar's murder was not an isolated incident, but part of a far darker pattern. The revelations shook the community to its core. Dharma Island, once a symbol of tradition and honor, became a place of whispered fears and unspoken questions. The truth, it seemed, was even darker than anyone could have imagined.